Good to go.
Hey everybody, Papa Wigs and Wigs back here with you, and we're gonna break down PPR wide receivers 31 through 60. Let's jump right into it.
I'll start things on off here with Brandon Cooks of the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, after looking at where I have him ranked, I think maybe I probably had him a little low. So he's definitely probably gonna jump up in my updated receiver rankings, especially given the fact that CD's in the middle of a stalemate with his contract right now. Uh, I gotta believe the Cowboys are going to sign CD. I just don't see that it's not going to happen. But in the case that they don't, that's obviously going to boost up Brandon Cooks. Listen, I think Brandon Cooks is, he's a decent receiver. I kind of think that um, he's been a little overrated some years. You know, you know, he's been not really injury prone, but he had a couple. He had a when in his earlier in his career, he did. He popped off, had four over 1,000 yard seasons between the Saints, New England, and the Rams. Then he had an off season because I think he was probably he was out a couple games. Then he jumped back up, had a couple decent seasons with Houston, and that I believe was with Watson. If I
I think
remember
one of the
correctly.
years was, and then they had Mills or whatever before Stroud.
Right. So, but the last 2 years, last year with the Cowboys and the year before that with the Texans, he got a lot of targets. He just didn't get a lot of yards, or I mean, last year he had what 8 touchdowns.
Yep.
So I mean, last year was better from a touchdown perspective, but he only had 54 receptions, 657 yards. Listen, I think Brandon Cooks is, you know, a, definitely a decent receiver, uh, and is helpful to his team from a fantasy perspective. Though, to me, he's nothing more than a potential, bye week option, injury replacement type guy. Uh, yeah, you definitely could have him on your bench because there's always the off chance that he pops up. This year could be a prime example, depending on what goes on with CD. Kind of stay tuned on that. Once you agree, Wiggs.
Yeah, and I think something I want to bring up too is the years that he's been good, he's been behind another good receiver. So
Yeah, we talked about that
for
the other
yeah, for
day.
example, like Michael Thomas there on the Saints, and then I think the only team he wasn't behind a like good receiver was on New England there, because I don't think they had anyone big named on the team at that time, unless Moss was still there. I don't think he was though, was he?
I don't remember.
But then he went to the Rams and he was behind Cooper Cup. So there's potential for pop off. In some of those years, he did finish top 15. We might have him really low here on the list, especially if CeeDee Lamb holds out for any period of time at the start of the season or any screwy stuff like that ends up happening. But
I could see
he's,
him jumping up. I mean, you had him at 48. I
yeah,
had him at 70. Maybe mid 50s potential, a little bit higher depending
he
on
could
CD.
break
But
top 30 too if he has like a year like he did behind Michael Thomas or anyone like that. It's just Dak Prescott went CeeDee Lamb's way like a lot last year. So
yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, it'll be interesting, and I think it all plays out what happens with CD. So, like I said, stay tuned for that. Definitely don't. I certainly wouldn't depend on him even as a flex option. Right now, like I said, to me, he's more of a draft, put on the bench, see what happens with CD, see how he plays out the first couple games, before you determine what you want to do with him. Definitely a bench guy, but to me, he's more of a bye week replacement or injury replacement if something happens, with like CD or some of your other guys, and you need to plug somebody in a desperate mode.
yeah, and a lot of these guys here from like probably like the 40 to 60 spot are either going to be your bench or possible flex guys here because you're going to have two starters, possible third. So Mike Williams up next at the Jets.
Yeah, we were really close on this one. Um, Listen, Mike Williams to me has all the talent in the world. He had, he had 2 years with the Chargers where he had over 1,000 yards. And but the last few years he's struggled with injuries. Last year he only played three games. The year before he only played 13. So, um, he's a big guy, 6'4", definitely a huge, threat in the end zone if you can. I mean, the one year, 20, he had 2 years where he had one is a sophomore year he had 10 TDs, and then 3 years ago he had 9 TDs. So he's definitely a guy that can be a threat. I think um, if he stays healthy, and that's a big if, having Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback, having Garrett Wilson there, also, Lazard's there. I think that he has the potential to, have a decent year. But again, he's got to be out on the field, and he's dealing with something. I know he's quite, he's questionable right now. I don't think he played. Um, he didn't play in their game yesterday, I believe it was. So that's where I ranked him where he is. I think he's probably good right here, with the caveat of he could definitely move up at any given point, depending on where we see he falls out and if he stays healthy. I mean, would you agree with that, Wiggs?
Yeah, I think the reason we ranked him so low is because of his state of health year to year. He's only really had, I think, 2 or 3 seasons where he's played the entirety of the season. But then, other than that, he's always missed some sort of games. And if he stays healthy, he's easily like a guy I could see breaking that top 30 mark as a wide receiver too on the Jets behind Garrett Wilson. He's had successful years behind Keenan Allen there in the Chargers offense, so it's not far fetched for him to be up there at all. And for me, this is someone I still could see people like taking a risk on as a possible flex player when healthy. When he's not healthy, it's just kind of
Yeah,
hard
right
to rank
now,
him.
right now, I think there's better options for a flex until you see he's a definitely draft. You got to
Yeah,
definitely draft a guy and stuff. I think initially though, my recommendation would be, if you're looking at a flex option, you may want to wait and see, how he pans out. Given other options on your bench, you may have better options. Who knows? If he comes out and he starts healthy this year and Rodgers starts to find him, then yeah, that's definitely gonna boost him up there. But I think it all depends on his health, and given the fact that he's already dealing with some stuff right now, makes me a little nervous about him, and that's why I ranked him where I did.
yeah, and if he stays healthy and something happened to Garrett Wilson, he could easily step up in his shoes. But at the end of the day, it's a health factor. I'd only draft him in case I needed some sort of depth or just to have him in case Wilson got hurt at any point. But other than that, he's borderline flex, mainly a bench player right now until we see him on the field again. Curtis Samuel.
Yeah, so Samuel, he's an interesting guy. Last year when he was with Washington, he didn't have a bad year. I mean, he had 62 receptions for over 600 yards and 4 touchdowns. So I think he's definitely, um, now that he's on the Bills team, he's a guy that I think you got to keep your eye on, and stuff. So, uh, because obviously they've got Shakir, who, he showed he showed some spurts last year. Um, I think it's a stretch to say that he's their wide receiver one. That's, I think, where they got him listed on the depth chart. I definitely think Keenan Coleman is going to have a huge impact this year. He's probably one of the rookies that are in one of the better situations, given that he's got Josh Allen throwing to him and stuff, and their wide receiver depth. But I do think Curtis Samuel has the potential to move up. I'm just not really comfortable with any of the Buffalo receivers this year, to be quite honest with you. The guy that I'm the highest on is Coleman, because I think he's the one that has the most upside. And given the fact that Samuel's switching over to a new team, he's got to develop that chemistry with Allen and stuff like that. So I definitely think he's a guy that should be drafted later in the round. You'd have on the bench. I wouldn't rely on him in any level of confidence to put in as a flex at this point. I think it's just kind of a wait and see with him.
Yeah, I think anyone really on this Bills offense right now is just kind of a risk. It'll be nice to draft them on the off chance that Josh Allen does find a connection with any of them, but just know that most likely with any of these receivers, really from the Bills offense, you're gonna have them on your bench. You might have a possible flex week. I know Samuel last year, um, for a few weeks there, you could plug him in as a flex and he kind of popped off. But it's a risk. And you do have Keon Coleman coming in. I think Keon Coleman will be that wide receiver one with ease. I think Curtis Samuel and Shakir will be that 2-3, kind of interchangeable. It'll kind of be like Shakir and Gabe Davis last year. Um, but yeah, I think Keon Coleman will be that wide receiver one, and I think Curtis Samuel is probably going to be in that 2 or 3 range. And you never know. Samuel could pop off. Allen's going to have to figure out something in his offense this year with his receivers. So,
well, I think he could have a similar year that he did last year, with the potential upside of maybe him and Allen develop that chemistry,
yeah.
and so to me there's upside with him. Once we see what kind of chemistry that they divide, because really, um, I know that Marquez Valdez Scantling hasn't been doing that great. They haven't been happy with him in training camp. They've got Mac Hollins, and I don't know if you guys remember him. He played for the Raiders. He's actually a decent guy, but outside of those two guys, I just don't see a lot of other guys threatening Samuel or to in regards to keeping him off the field. So he definitely has upside.
Move on though from Samuel. We will go to Wandale Robinson.
Boy, you know, this is another guy that I might have ranked a little bit low, um, because again, I'm not a huge Danny Dimes, you know, uh, fan, or Daniel Jones fan. I think that the Giants made a huge mistake paying him all that money. I don't think that they're gonna be playing from behind a lot this year. I feel so. To me, that's from a fantasy perspective, that's always a good thing, because that means that they're gonna be throwing the ball. Given the fact that they got Neighbors, who I think, again, Neighbors, even though he probably didn't want to go to the Giants, from a uh, you know standpoint of production, I think Neighbors is definitely in a good situation where he's going to get a lot of opportunity to showcase himself. And with that said, I think that's going to open up things with Robinson, because the Giants really never had a true number one, and I think Neighbors is going to be that guy. Maybe not initially, but I think with Robinson, he has the potential to have a decent year. I know last year he had 60 catches for 525 yards. He really wasn't a red zone threat because of Barkley. That could change though, because they don't have Barkley this year. I don't really consider Singletary a huge red zone threat, so I could see them throwing in the red zone more. They lost, their tight end Waller, who retired. So I I look at Robinson the same way as I do Samuel. I think that there's a lot of upside here, just for the potential of the Giants. I think are going to have to throw a lot this year. I think they're going to be coming from behind. They're going to have to throw the ball. I don't, I think they're going to struggle in their running game. And outside of Neighbors, they've got a couple other guys. I mean, they got Isaiah McKenzie. He was on the Bills last year. He's okay. But Wendell, he showed that he has the talent, and the speed and stuff. So I think 57 is probably a good spot for him. I might have had him ranked a little bit low. I think Wiggs probably got it a little bit closer than I did, and stuff, because I do think that there's the potential. I think he could be a borderline flex guy, just given the situation with the Giants, because it's a little bit different than the Bills. But I would wait and see. If you got better options, you certainly would start them first. See where he kind of pans out the first game or two in the season before you make a decision. But he's definitely somebody that needs to be on a bench somewhere, because he has a lot of potential. I mean, wouldn't you agree, Wiggs?
Yeah, he's got a lot of upside, and he's shown sparks in the last 2 years. It's just never been consistent because of the quarterback play. And last year, it's not fully on him. They had two separate injuries at quarterback. Ended up with Tommy DeVito, and I mean, nothing against DeVito, but he wasn't the answer. And really,
Yeah.
it's just been bad quarterback play. Like Neighbors and Robinson both could have pretty good years, and I do agree they're probably going to be playing from behind in the majority of the games. And you look at their schedule from a rushing standpoint, it's looking brutal there for Singletary. He's going to have a rough year in my eyes. I could see Tracy
Yeah.
picking up some slack there. If anything, I see Tracy taking away maybe some red zone runs, because from what I've seen video wise, he looks like he's like a bit bulkier than Singletary. So I could totally see them putting him in there for anything within like the 5 or 7. So aside from that, though, like Neighbors and Robinson should be those guys. You might see an occasional flash from Slayton or Hodgins. You do have Allen Robinson now as well, so like the third spot's kind of up in the air, even that fourth spot. So
Oh yeah, I forgot about Slayton. I should have
yeah,
mentioned him. Yeah, yeah, they do have Slayton. I don't know. I think there's more upside with McKenzie, because McKenzie showed some spurts with the Bills, but I think, but out of Slayton and Robinson,
yeah,
I,
like Robinson's kind
I
of
think
just in
Robinson's
a better spot,
got more upside. So, and he's young.
and he'll be a deep threat. He's 5'8", and from what we've seen the last few years, he's a pretty quick receiver. It kind of reminds me of kind of like an Addison speed wise, just not as talented or hasn't shown it yet.
Well, he's just not been in
Yeah,
as good a situation.
yeah.
So,
But any of these guys so far, I'd say borderline flex if you needed them, but definitely bench to probably begin the year. Adam Thielen.
man, I love Adam Thielen. As you guys know, I'm a huge Vikings fan from Minnesota. I mean, everybody in Minnesota loved Adam Thielen. I was a bit surprised at the production that he had last year. I didn't think that he was going to do that. I really didn't. He had 100 receptions, over 1,000 yards, 4 touchdowns. So I, to be honest, I was shocked. I don't think he's going to have that same production this year. I think that they brought in Deontay Johnson. They drafted Leggett, in pretty high in the draft. They still do have Terrence Marshall. They do have Jonathan Mingo, Amir Smith Marset, who is another guy that used to play for the Vikings that I know well. But I love him. I think that he's a grizzled veteran. Do I think he's going to have over 1,000 yards this year? No.
Not a chance.
I don't think he's going to have over 1,000 yards. Do I think he's going to have a decent year? I think that he'll have an okay year. I think there's always the potential that he could break off and maybe get 1,000 yards. I just don't see him getting 100 receptions this year and being targeted 137 times with Deontay Johnson and Leggett there. I really don't. the Panthers went out and they really strengthened their offense this year. The new regime that came in, they drafted a running back, they drafted a wide receiver, they brought in Deontay Johnson. They really filled a lot of holes on offense, and Adam's going to be that veteran leader on the team. But um, I don't, I know a lot of people have him in the top 50. I think that's a stretch. I'm not saying it couldn't happen. I just don't see it happening, especially with Deontay John. I think Deontay is going to come in and he's going to have a rebound year. So I think Adams going to have maybe 50, 60 receptions, maybe 600 yards, and possibly, 3 to 4 touchdowns. Um, you definitely could consider him a flex option, borderline flex option, but I think it's kind of wait and see with him. Once these other receivers come in there. So, I mean, he could surprise everybody. I could be totally wrong. I just don't think he's gonna have a repeat of last year.
No, he's definitely not, especially with Deontay coming in. I could see him getting anywhere from 60 to 70 reception, or not reception. I think he's going to get around like 70-ish targets, maybe 75, with maybe like 55 to 60 receptions next year. Because they, like you said, they did draft a young receiver in Leggett, which I think will chip away at his production as well. But who knows? Bryce Young did have a pretty solid connection with them last year. Like, yeah, it didn't pan out when it came to touchdowns. Only 4 touchdowns there, but um, really overall, it's gonna come down to what connection he still has with Bryce Young, and I think Deontay will have a pretty solid year. And like you said, who knows? He could come out and surprise us. Maybe it's just him and Deontay running that offense. They're the receivers, and they both go for over 1,000 or something. But which I could totally see happening. I have Bryce Young ranked pretty high on my quarterbacks right now. I think he'll have a pretty good year. So for all we know, he could throw for over 4,000, and 2 guys on that team could be Deontay and Thielen. So
I think there's some upside, but I just don't see a repeat of last year. So, and personally, I think some of these other guys that are ranking him higher are basing that off of his production last year, and I really don't think that they're. I really just don't see it. I just see that he's going to have a drop off. He's not a spring chicken anymore. So he's going to be turning, 34. He's 33 right now. So he's getting up there in years. So yeah, I definitely think he's going to have a drop off.
moving on from Mr. Thielen, Johan Dotson.
You know, when Dotson came into the league, I was really high on him, and I still am. I think he has a lot of potential. He's definitely showing that he's effective in the red zone. He had 7 touchdowns his rookie year, 4 touchdowns last year. He had 49, excuse me, 49 receptions. Um, excuse me, Wiggs. Sorry about that. So, and over 500 yards. I think this year he has the potential of having a better year. I think there's upside there. But man, I'm hot. Like I mentioned earlier in our other video about Luke McCaffrey. God, it wouldn't surprise me if these guys have the same kind of a production this year, that they go head to head and they're kind of bouncing back and forth between number 2, number 3 behind McLaurin on the Commanders team. That's just my opinion. I definitely think he's a guy worth drafting, having on your bench. But if you're going to use him as a flex or thinking about using him as a flex, just know that there's going to be some games he's just not going to have production, and there's going to be some games where he could have 1 or 2 touchdowns. So, um, I definitely think he's talented, and it'll be interesting to see how him and Daniels hook up and stuff. So I think there's upside with him. I still think that he he's showing that he can be a quality receiver. I just think that 55 right now where we got him is probably about right.
Yeah, I think the position's all right. I don't know personally if I'd have him above Thielen, but I did have him ranked a little bit lower than my last few. Um, I like Dotson. I just haven't seen enough from him to be like completely sold on him, and I actually think Luke McCaffrey is just gonna overstep him like early in the season, and I think he's gonna be that wide receiver two on the team, and I think he will overshine Dotson a little bit here. Not like a crazy amount, but enough to be like clinched in at that like wide receiver two on the team. So like I'm not as high on Dotson this year, but it's really hard to judge with the rookie quarterback coming in and then having, from what I've seen and heard, a really good talent in Luke McCaffrey on the team.
Well, I think between him, Thielen, Robinson, and you could even say Samuel, you know, they could, any one of those guys could flip flop.
Well, I think any one of these six could really flip flop, to be honest, especially if Williams and Cooks are healthy all year. It's kind of all just a little bit of a toss up, and a lot of these guys are actually super close when we ranked them, so you never know what can happen.
Yeah.
We're not going to be spot on, but Romeo Dobbs.
So Romeo Dobbs is again, he's a great young talent for Green Bay. I love the receivers on Green Bay. Um, they've got to me they've got five solid receivers on that team right now. Uh, you know, at any given moment, any one of them could step up. Last year Dobbs had 59 receptions, 674 yards, and he had 8 touchdowns. So he was one of the guys that I think it was mainly down in the red zone they love kind of looked for Dobbs or Wicks. I think those were kind of the guys. Wicks is more of a big play guy. As if you guys watched any of the games yesterday, Wicks went off and he had a he had a long I think it was a 65-yard touchdown at the beginning of the game. So that's just how it's going to be with the receivers this year. I think a lot of the receivers production in Green Bay is going to come down to who's going to be out on the field the most as well. So I know Dobbs' his rookie year only played 13 games. I don't know if that was injury related or not. I think it might have been a little bit. But last year he played all 17 games. I like Dobbs. And I think that he has the potential to be a flex guy. It's just that to me, with the Packers having five solid receivers, they got Reed, Watson, Wicks, Dobbs, Melton. Those five guys are five young, solid receivers, and I think it's all going to come down to who's going to stay out on the field. If Dobbs stays out on the field this year like he did last year, I think that he has the potential to have the same type of year this year. Same kind of production. So, he potentially could have a little bit more in touchdowns. Him and Love built some chemistry. So, I like Dobbs as a borderline flex right now. Definitely a bench guy. Again, I hate saying this as a Vikings fan, but I do like the receivers on the Packers team.
Yeah, and we're actually pretty close in rankings here, and I think you and I are kind of on the same page. It's really hard to judge this receiving core because we just don't know who the wide receiver one truly is, or even the wide receiver two or three. We just don't know where it's like set in stone right now. Last year, I think some of the production from Dobbs came from Watson being hurt, and for all we know, Watson can be hurt again. He's been injury prone since entering the league, but he did step up. Him and Jaden Reed both had 8 touchdowns last year, which is nuts for two really young receivers to have, and they both produced quite a bit. It's just with the healthy Watson, at least in my eyes, I think Dobbs falls into that 3 role on that offense. But I don't know. Again, it's hard because, like you said, there's in my eyes, four. I don't know Bo Melton too well, but there could be five really good guys on that roster, and realistically, you maybe could pick any one of those five, and you could be fine, even if it's just on your bench. Because for all we know, Jordan Love could throw for another 35 plus touchdowns this year, and all you really need is a touchdown a week for your receiver to have
Yeah,
good points.
I agree, and the one thing I will say is from a fantasy perspective, I kind of give Dobbs, a little bit of an edge, um, from a touchdown perspective over some of the other guys on the Packers. And as everybody knows, I don't know, what did Reed have last year. Reed, I think last year had, well, he had 8 touchdowns
Yep.
last year too. So, if you look at, it was kind of spread out between the receivers, but I still do think that Dobbs, from the games I watched, he was always kind of one of the primary targets that Love looked at. So I give him a little bit of an edge from a touchdown production, but I think any one of those receivers could overtake one another when it comes to fantasy points.
Yeah, and I know like height not be might not be the best argument, but you look at it too, and I could totally see why they were going to Dobbs over like someone like Wicks because he's slightly taller, but like you got Watson coming in, so maybe if Watson's healthy, it might chip away a little bit at the production of touchdowns. But a bigger body is always nice to have because you can throw the ball up higher, more towards the sideline. You have the reach, so
Yeah, nope, I agree.
but honestly, any of the Packers, and God, I hate saying this too, you could literally just have sitting on your bench and it's a good fantasy value because at any week someone could get hurt, or if you start them at flex, it could pop off. Never really know with any of them. I believe this is Khalil Shakir, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
so Shakir last year, um, he 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 ended up with 611 yards on 39 receptions, and had 2 touchdowns. I think his production last year was, along with Dalton Kincaid, was part of the reason why the Bills ended up getting rid of Diggs. Um, so I think that they're really high on Shakir. Uh, I I think that right around where we have him is probably a good spot for him. Because I do think that he could get lost in the shuffle now that they have Samuel and Coleman and even Mac Hollins for that matter, and stuff. So I definitely think Shakir needs to be on the bench because you just never know. Rookie receivers, some of them can have a really great year. Coleman could have come out and have a really great year. Some of them really struggle. So if Coleman starts struggling, then Allen's going to start looking Shakir's way along with Samo. So I think he's definitely worth having on the bench. Um, and borderline flex guy, potentially, I think you again, uh, my advice would be if you got someone better on your bench as a flex guy, I would certainly go with them first, at least at the beginning of the year until you see where Shakir kind of falls in Buffalo's plans. I agree with Wiggs from a wide receiver perspective. I'm not really comfortable, with any of the wide receivers on Buffalo's team right now, at least. Given all the changes that they've going on, I think this could be a Kincaid, Knox, James Cook type of year. I could see them mixing it up, kind of like the Chiefs like to do, and spreading it around. So I'm not. I want to wait and see before I even plug in any of the wide receivers on the Bills team, even at a flex option.
Yeah, I think Romeo Dobbs of everyone on the board right now is probably the only person I feel comfortable plugging in at a flex spot.
I would agree with that because at any point Dobbs could have a touchdown, which right
Yeah.
away gives you, in a PPR that gives you 6 points right away.
Yep.
Well, seven
Seven with the
plus the
reception,
reception.
yeah.
So
So like for me, I'd probably swap the two personally, but looking at the depth chart, you can't really sleep on people like Mac Hollins or Chase Claypool, even for that matter, to potentially get some reception. So it's hard for me to judge Shakir. I had him quite a bit lower than you did, um, but that's just because I'm not like fully sold on any wide receiver aside from Keon Coleman in this offense right now.
yeah, and I would agree with you. I think I probably had him ranked a little bit too high. I definitely don't think Shakir is going to be a top 50 receiver this year. I definitely think that, some of the other guys we talked about here, especially Dobbs, definitely have more potential of making the top 50 than Shakir. That's just my opinion. So, given the
Yeah.
situations.
Yeah, if it was in my power of hands right now, I'd probably have him right around that Thielen Wandale range. I'd probably have Dotson higher than him personally, but moving on. That offense is so hard to judge. That's probably the hardest one for me to look at right now.
Yeah.
Joshua Palmer, and I want to state this now. I think we have him too low.
Yeah, I don't know how to feel about Palmer. He's been with the Chargers. This is going to be his third year. This is going to be his fourth year. Last year he only played in 10 games. He's back healthy this year. Um, he doesn't have a lot of competition for that wide receiver 2 position. I know some people think that he's going to be, he could be the one. I don't think he will. I think McConkey is going to be the number one there. Uh, um, I really think that Jim Harbaugh is going to be a run heavy team. I think that all the receivers on this team, just like Buffalo, are you should proceed with caution until you see where they're going to be. Don't get me wrong, I love Justin Herbert. I think he's a great quarterback. I just think that you're going to see a run heavy uh, offense. I don't think that you're going to see a lot of shots down the field. Maybe some here and there. Palmer is he's never been a huge touchdown threat. I don't see that happening this year either. I think obviously his production this year, if he stays healthy, is probably going to go up.
Yeah.
So I will say that. Um, I don't necessarily, I'm not comfortable to say that I would go any higher than or put him in the top 50 right now because, again, I just knowing Jim Harbaugh's history, especially when he used to coach in the NFL with the 49ers and what he did with Michigan, um, you know, I just wait and see. So, do I think he should be drafted? Yes, he's definitely a draft guy. Do I think he's potential flex? Not until I see what the Chargers do with their offense.
Yeah, I could see the argument for that. For me, it'd be a potential flex option depending on who I had on my roster already. Um, which at this point really could be any of. There could be like 3 or 4 guys above him, so he might not even be in that conversation. But it's hard to judge, and I agree with you. I think Lad McConkey is going to be the number one receiver there on that team. Joshua Palmer last year, when Keenan Allen and Mike Williams were both hurt, really didn't too much outside of one game where he had 113 yards, but he only was targeted 4 times. So I don't know. It's hard to judge. And he was targeted 10 times and 8 times in 2 other games without those two in, and I don't know. He just didn't really shine like you thought he would once the top 2 receivers on that team were out and you were the number one guy. So maybe thinking about it now, maybe we have him ranked pretty good. I still think maybe Dobbs could be above him, but
I agree with that. I definitely think that Dobbs is probably a little bit low compared to some of these other
yeah.
guys.
But at least we got some common ground there, right? Rome Odunze.
Yeah, so um, Wiggs and I are a little bit further apart on this. I think Odunze has the potential to be one of the rookies that has a really good year. Um, but I see why Wiggs has him ranked where he does. I mean, they got DJ Moore. They just brought in Keenan Allen. There.
Got Cole Kmet.
So they got Cole Kmet. Yeah. But I do think that Odunze is. It's interesting. Do they even have him?
They don't even have him ranked down. Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah. They don't even have him on the depth chart. But at any rate, I think that he has the potential to have a decent year. I'm not convinced that Keenan Allen's going to stay healthy all year. Keenan's getting up there in age. I think he's still going to be productive, but I think Keenan could miss a few games, which is going to help Udunzi. I think his production is going to come later in the year rather than early in the year because I think he's still going to be getting comfortable with the offense coming in. He's definitely behind two really great receivers in the NFL right now. So, that's, and they also have Komet and Everett as their tight ends. So I think he's going to be down on the chain and they're going to give him time to grow. So, but as the season goes on, I definitely think that his production could go up, as he gets more comfortable with the offense. And I also think that, like I said, Keenan Allen, I just don't see Allen playing in all 17 games this year. So I think that is going to, there's going to be an opportunity where he might be able to shine. And if he shines, the Bears aren't going to hold him back. So, Allen only played 13 games last year, 10 games the year before. I mean, Allen played 16 and 21, and 14 and 20. So he's got a history of missing games, and I just see that happening again this year, especially given the fact that he's 32, going to be 33 coming into the season. Yes, he's been consistent for most of the years that he's played and stuff, but you don't draft somebody at number 9 to have them sit on the bench. They're definitely going to use them. So he definitely needs to be drafted. I think he's got a lot of upside, and he's one of those rookies that could potentially go off. Um, you know, depending on the opportunities that he's given. So to me, I wouldn't recommend plugging him in as a flex or anything right away, but I think you keep him on your bench and you hold on to him, and I think as the season moves along, you're going to see more production from him.
Yeah, the one hard thing for me is just the amount of competition he's going to have to get targets. I understand why they drafted him. Like, yeah, they signed Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen's only going to be playing for another, like, what, 1 or 2 years after this, if that's like. They're kind of setting a Dunzy up to be in a perfect position of he's going to learn from two guys that know what they're doing in the league, in DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. And then as soon as Allen's done playing, or they trade Allen away, or he gets like hurt, like career-ending injury or something, because when he gets hurt next, it's probably going to be the last time he really gets hurt. Um, he can step into those shoes and fill that role. Like, I could possibly see him being around this 50 spot if, like you said, if Keenan Allen got hurt. But with the competition between DJ Moore, Allen, Komet, Everett, you throw the running backs in on top of that with Swift, Johnson, and Herbert. Like, it's hard for me to really.
See, you and I disagree on that. I think that the more people that you have available for targets opens it up for other people, because it's just like the Vikings with Jefferson and stuff like that. I mean, some of these guys are going to be double teamed, and that's going to give other guys opportunities. So I I don't necessarily know that that's going to take a knock on him, but I definitely don't think he's going to have 1,000 yards.
No, I don't even know if he'll have more than 6.
So, but I do think that at the end of the year, he could be a receiver that we're talking about from a fantasy perspective that is starting to heat up, and that needs to have the conversation of, okay, should he be an everyday flex?
Yeah, I don't see him being a flex until Keenan Allen gets hurt at all. Personally, I would have him where I ranked him really around that 60 spot, but yeah, I think he's just going to get lost in the sauce. There's too much going on in that offense. It reminds me of, like, kind of.
Well, he's 6'3", 215 pounds, and I definitely could see him being used in the red zone too. So that's something that you gotta keep in mind. With him as well. So he may not get as many targets as the other guys, but he definitely could be a red zone target for the Bears this year. And listen, if he's a red zone target and he gets 8 to 10 touchdowns, that's huge. So I'm not saying it's going to happen, but there's the potential that it could.
There's always potential. I don't see it, but. Rashad Shaheed. Or Rashid Shaheed? Yeah.
So he's sitting behind
Love it.
Chris Olave. Listen, I don't know. I've got some opinions. He had 46 targets, 719 yards, 5 touchdowns last year. Uh, you know what? It's hard for me to talk about this Saints offense. I watched some highlights from their preseason game yesterday. I've read a lot of stuff about them. Derek Carr to me is he's not having a great camp. I just don't know what to feel about Shaheed or Olave. I know everybody's got Olave, um, you know, are super high on him. Um, I don't know. I'm not necessarily buying into that yet because I'm just not convinced that there's that chemistry yet. But time will tell. Shaheed also had an issue. His rookie year he was out. I think it was 4 games. Last year he missed a couple games. And he's dealing with some stuff right now as well. So uh, I think 50. I think I might have ranked him actually a little bit high compared to some of these other receivers. I think some of these other receivers are going to have a better year than Shaheed. I definitely think that he's definitely someone you have to draft. When you look at who else is on um, the Saints team for a wide receiver perspective behind him and Olave, they just don't have a lot of depth on this team right now. And you always got to deal with Kamara coming out of the backfield because, as everybody knows, Kamara is just like McCaffrey, where he's going to get a lot of receptions. If I had to do it over again, I probably would rank Shaheed a little bit lower until I kind of see how it shakes out and where he's at, from a health perspective as well.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with you there. I think he'll have a decent production this year if he stays healthy, but I don't know if I'd put him higher than 55. I looking at this, I'd probably drop him at least 2 or 3 spots. I might even just swap him straight up with Dobbs, but it's hard for me to judge. Like Carr hasn't had the greatest last few years, and the only positive coming out of this whole situation right now is the fact they don't have Michael Thomas in that offense anymore. So,
And Carr struggled yesterday in their preseason game. He did not have a great start.
um,
And he's got Taysom Hill and Rattler right on his heels, and they signed him to a big contract. I just think the Saints are a mess right now.
yeah, but I still could see him being around the 55 range. He is one of those speedy, quick receivers that at any given moment could catch 60+ yard touchdown and put up 13 to 15 right away.
I agree with you if he's on the field.
Yeah, but I agree with you on the aspect of it's a hard offense to judge with everything. So, Rashi Rice.
Yeah, Rice was really hard to judge this year. I know a lot of guys um, have him ranked a lot higher on some of these other sites, and that's all fine and dandy. He definitely had a great year last year. Just missed 1,000 yards, had 79 targets. Here's the problem from a fantasy perspective: he's going to be suspended because of what happened. Nobody knows what that suspension is going to be yet. It could be 6 games, it could be 4 games, it could be 8 games. We don't know. So even though he's got the greatest talent in the world, that from a fantasy perspective, that doesn't help you if he's not playing. So, given the fact that I keep hearing that he's at minimum going to have 6 games. It could be all the way up to 8 games. Who knows? The NFL could suspend him all year. I don't know. I just didn't feel comfortable. I didn't have him in the top 50. He kind of shook into the 50. I don't know how he got in there, but I definitely think that he probably isn't going to be in the top 50, given the fact that um, he's probably going to miss a minimum of at least 6 games. So what that does mean though is, given the fact that he's going to be out and Hollywood Brown just got hurt, they're talking he's going to miss several weeks. Potentially, they're not even sure, when he's going to be able to come back and if he's even going to start the regular season. It's definitely going to boost some of the other receivers on the team. Xavier Worthy, who they drafted, Sky Moore, uh, Tony. So there's going to be other guys on there that are going to have opportunities and stuff. But it was really hard for me to rank him in the top 50, not knowing how many games he's going to be suspended and stuff. If you want to take a flyer on him late in the draft, you certainly can. But here's the thing, then he's going to take up a bench spot, because in most leagues that I've been in, usually they're not going to let you have a guy on,
on IR. Or
on
something.
IR. They're only going to let you have guys on IR. They're not going to let you have guys on your roster that are not on our IR. Some leagues do. Most leagues that I've been in don't. So he's going to eat up a roster spot, um, you know, on your roster until you know how long he's suspended and stuff. Hopefully that's going to happen before most people's drafts, because if you know when he's suspended, then you can decide.
You kind of plan when you want to draft him, if you want to take him.
If you want to take him and take a flyer, he's definitely probably going to be a guy that's going to be a hot waiver wire addition if he doesn't get drafted, depending on if and when he plays this year.
I think regardless, he'll end up getting drafted. I just wouldn't draft him higher than you need to, because like you said, he's gonna be suspended for a select amount of games. That's not gonna help you in the first month or month and a half. That could even put you behind quite a bit if you do draft him earlier than what you probably should. I understand the hype around him, but he's going to be off the field. He's then going to have to get into the groove, which could take, a week or two, maybe 3 for him to fully get back into it, because he's already going to be coming into the season late. For me personally, I could just see him struggling coming off a suspension and getting into the mix of things. And I don't know. It's hard for me to say I'd want him on my team, because I wouldn't.
Like right now, he can practice with them and stuff,
Yeah.
in training camp and in games and the preseason games. But once they make a decision, then he's not going to be at the facility. So,
but I do think this skyrockets Xavier Worthy quite a bit, because, like you said, Hollywood Brown's hurt, who we actually come up to here pretty quick in this list, and Worthy as well. So, it'll be interesting, because the suspension, the injury, I could see them trying to bring in another receiver. There's too many intangibles right now where I think we have him placed perfectly. The only reason he's in the top 50 is because of the other averages between the other guys, because they're lower than him.
Yeah. Well, and I could definitely see them maybe bringing Juju in at Kansas City, because Juju was there last year.
2 years ago, yeah.
Or 2 years ago.
Any one of these receivers is really hard to judge. Tank Dell.
Is that Tank Dell?
Yes.
Tank Dell had I thought he had a good year last year when he was out on the field, considering he was only on the field for 11 games. He had over 700 yards, 47 receptions. I definitely think this guy's got a lot of talent. So I don't see him having the same amount of production, though. That's just my opinion. I think his production is going to drop off. Given the fact that they brought in Diggs, they brought in, they've got Collins, who they just signed to a big contract. This is one team that is definitely loaded with a bunch of receivers. I mean, this receiving core on Houston is insane. The amount of guys they got on here. I know a lot of teams are going to be watching to see who they keep, who they don't keep, maybe potentially trade somebody. Me personally, I'd love for the Vikings to trade for him, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think Houston's high on him, but from a fantasy perspective, I think his numbers might be right around what he did last year if he plays the whole season. I think he could be around maybe 50 receptions. And I don't know that he'll have as many touchdowns, but he could have seven, maybe five touchdowns. It's just really hard, you know, to judge on this because, like we talked about with Green Bay, right? And listen, you got Nico Collins, who I think is there. Everybody knows Stephon Diggs. Don't get me wrong, I love Stephon Diggs. He's a great wide receiver, but he's not going to be happy if he's not getting the ball. That's just
He was
Stephon
already
Diggs.
unhappy in a preseason game.
That's just Stephon Diggs' mo. That's what it is. So, I know that there was some issues with him and Josh Allen. Maybe going into a more laid back QB like C.J. Stroud will help and stuff. But I definitely think Dell could definitely be in the. I definitely think he's going to be in the top 50. Given the fact that he has the potential to have anywhere from 5 to 10 touchdowns, right? So, but it wouldn't surprise me if somebody reaches out and maybe sees if they can trade for him. I definitely think that Houston's probably been on the phone with a lot of teams about their receivers to see if they can get anything for some of these receivers because they got Nico, they got Stephon, they got Tank, they got Noah Brown, who we talked about already. They got Robert Woods, who's healthy, and actually had a decent game yesterday for them. They got John Mechie, who's another young wide receiver. I mean, they just got a
Well, they traded for Ben Scorot. I don't even know how to say it.
show rock from
Neck from the Rams.
Yeah, so they've got a whole bunch of receivers. So I think he's definitely someone that's going to need to be drafted, but you got to kind of wait and see how the preseason here plays out in regards to where he falls on their depth chart and if he's even still with the team.
I think you hit that pretty right on the spot. I don't really have much to say. You covered that pretty well, and I personally would love to see him on the Vikings, but that probably will never happen. But you can't tell. Big Vikings fans, obviously. But Jerry Judy.
Yeah, I might have had him ranked a little bit low. Um, and I think the only reason I probably ranked him a little bit lower is compared to Wiggs is because of you know he has struggled, but last year he did play 16 games. um but he hasn't had, I think he had one full season maybe back in 2020. I think that was before they switched to 17 games.
I believe so.
But he hasn't had a full season since then. Now, granted, he played 16 games last year, 15 games the year before, and then 2021 he only played 10. Um, I think this guy's got a tremendous amount of talent. Um, and I think that he is definitely somebody that could lift the Browns receiving core, with Cooper, and then they got Elijah Moore, who they brought over from the Jets. They've got a few other guys that are not well known and stuff. So I think he's got the talent, and he could have a decent year. I definitely think he needs to be drafted. He's, for me though, I think he might. There's some guys that might be a little bit, that should be maybe a little bit higher than him that we've already talked about on this list until we kind of see how it pans out. But with that said, I think that he could still have a decent season. With the Browns, potential top 50 guy, yes. He's got too much talent not to say that. But for me personally, it's somebody that I'd have on my bench, but I don't know that I'd say right away that I'm going to throw him in as a flex.
Yeah, for me, I have this weird gut feeling that Deshaun Watson's gonna have a great year, and I think that kind of swayed me to put Judy a little bit higher. I actually could see Judy and Cooper having similar numbers this year. Not like fully similar. Like I think Cooper will still have that edge, but for some reason, I just have like this feeling that he's gonna have a really good year with Watson. think his touchdown production will be up. I don't think he'll eclipse 1,000 yards, but I think his touchdowns will make up for it because I think a lot of the focus will still be on Amari Cooper, and we really haven't seen like two solid receivers on this offense in some time. Like I don't remember the last time we've seen like two.
Well, Elijah Moore's got talent.
No, he's not bad. Yeah,
he just hasn't been given an opportunity. He had some issues, with the coaching staff. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I think he's where he needs to be right now.
For me, he's a definite flex if you don't have like a third receiver that's better than him on your roster, but I could also see an argument for him being a bench player at the start of the year just because, like you pointed out, we really haven't seen a full season put together. Even his year when he was like top 25 as a receiver, he missed 2 games. So
well, and he's on a new team and a new offense, and he has to build chemistry with a new quarterback. So that all plays into how these guys.
And this offense is a little more run heavy at times too. So like I could still see the argument there as well, especially when Chubb comes back. I could see them leaning on Chubb a little more once he's in the swing of things. But
and I think he's still dealing with something. I don't think it's anything major, but. I do think he's still got some kind of tweaks. I don't know if it's his hamstring or what, but it's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I definitely do think he could be in that top 40 range, personally. All right, Kansas City put out number 2, Xavier Worthy. Who I think after the Hollywood Brown injury, which happened yesterday, we have.
Well, I think him and Hollywood Brown. Well, personally, I think Worthy should jump up to where, at bare minimum, where we have Brown ranked right now, given Brown's injury. I think Hollywood Brown, definitely until we find out and know more about exactly how long he's gonna miss, which they don't have any idea right now. That's going to make Brown slide down in the rankings. So I would proceed with caution on Brown, who we're going to talk about here real shortly. On our rankings, given what just happened, I would definitely put Worthy where Brown is, and then I don't know that Brown should necessarily even be in the top 50 until we find out. Because he's going to slide down.
I don't even know if Brown will be in the top 60, depending on how long the injury is.
So let's wait and see. But I definitely think Worthy has opportunity here. We need to, I definitely think he has opportunity here, and we need to see if he's going to take advantage of it. It's always hard to know with Kansas City because Andy Reid likes to mix things up, and he likes to spread the ball around. I was really surprised that Rice had the year he did last year. He likes to mix things up. Yep. So I think it's really going to be hard to judge right now, but I definitely do think out of all the receivers on the team right now, Worthy's the one with the most upside and the potential to definitely break the top 50.
I think of any receiver on this team, the only one I would currently draft would be Worthy, just due to the fact that as long as he doesn't get hurt before the season starts, looking at the depth chart, technically he is the wide receiver 1 right now on this team. So Mahomes will have to throw the ball to people. He should get a lot of targets. Yes, I think Mahomes will rely on Sky Moore or Justin Watson or McCole Hardman, who he's already had a connection with in the past. But for all we know, Xavier Worthy could have a year that Rashee Rice had last year, and it might have to happen for this offense to succeed because you got a hurt receiver and now... Well, and you have a suspended receiver. So,
yeah. And keep Justin Watson in your back of your head, too. Not necessarily to draft, but he could be one of those guys that, steps up, given his experience as part of this offense. Sky Moore, I think, is also another guy that has opportunity to step up, but I know that Sky Moore hasn't been consistent and they haven't been necessarily happy with him. So I really feel like that Justin Watson is going to have an opportunity to slide up there and have an impact as well. but he's definitely a deep, deep, deep sleeper type of guy in fantasy.
Yeah, and I wouldn't doubt it if Andy Reid maybe notices his receiving core isn't the greatest, and he's gonna have to figure something out. Like with Rice last year, his second half of the year was way better than his first half, but I think that's because Andy Reid found a way to get him more involved. So maybe that's something where we see a slow start to Worthy this year, and then he finds a way of getting Worthy more involved in that offense. But I also wouldn't doubt it if we saw more production out of both Travis Kelce and Noah Gray on that offense. I could see a lot more two tight end setups just because they really don't have like that set receiving core, you know.
Yeah, well, and I know that they've been playing around with Kadarius Toney at running back
Yeah.
and stuff as well, so that's another name to watch out for. It's, for me personally, it's really hard on the Chiefs' offense to rely on any receivers. I mean, until you actually see what Andy Reid's going to do. And, Andy Reid is one of the best coaches in the history of the NFL for a reason, and that's because he keeps his opponents guessing. And so you never know what Reid's going to do, game to game, because he always switches things up and stuff. So, and that's what makes him so great.
But when in doubt, rely on Andy Reid. Hopkins.
Yeah, so D Hop, I think he's another one just like Brown that's probably going to drop a little bit here. Um, they say he's not going to need knee surgery. There's the potential that he could return by week 1, but they're not sure yet. I think that he's probably good right where he's at, because both of us, again, we had him at 47. I think he's good right where we have him right now, but I would give him an arrow down if I were to look at potential rankings, given, what we find out the more we go into training camp here and when he comes back. He's the type of guy that, he's got chemistry with Levis. He's not one that I worry about if he does come back where you're going to see, any potential drop off, because, he's been in the league so long and stuff. So I think it's just a matter of when he gets back on that field. So right now, I think he's good at where he's at, could potentially drop down, could potentially go up, based on what we find out. Definitely a guy that you can draft, and keep on your roster. And if he does go on pub or anything for some reason, you can put him on IR in most leagues, and and still have him on your team and replace him. Definitely needs to be on the team. And I'm a huge fan of D Hop. I think that any given year he could have 10 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Minimum. He's just that talented. I just think it's a matter of when he's going to play and stuff. So I think it's kind of wait and see with him right now. To me, he's definitely a flex option to consider when he is on the field, for sure, because at any given time he can pop off with a 2-touchdown game. So that's just my opinion. So
Yeah, and I think the 1-2 punch between him and Ridley is going to be nice, and then even throwing Tyler Boyd into the mix as well it'll be a fun offense to watch. I think. I don't know if they're necessarily going to win a lot of games, but I think it'll be a fun offense. It's a little hard to judge who's going to do what week, because all 3 of the receivers really can score a touchdown whenever, and then you have 2 running backs that like to receive the ball a lot. But I don't know. I think it's going to be a fun offense. I'm excited to see how they do this year.
yeah, it'll be interesting.
Jameson Williams.
Just like Wiggs said a little bit earlier about Deshaun Watson, I've just got this gut feeling that Jameson Williams is going to have a really good year. Last year, because of his suspension, he only played 12 games. He had 34 or 24 receptions for 350 yards and 2 touchdowns. This guy is really talented, though. Really talented. I think he's a great compliment to St. Brown. It wouldn't surprise me if he sneaks into the top 40 at some point. That's just my opinion. I think he's got a quarterback and Goff that can get him the ball and stuff. Now that he's gonna have a full season and stuff, because obviously his rookie year when they drafted him, he was hurt. That's why he didn't play. That's why he only played in 6 games in his rookie year. And last year he had his suspension and stuff. So this year I think is going to be, I think he could be a breakout player this year. I'm really high on him. I definitely feel like he is definitely in the conversation for a flex every single week. That's just my opinion, because he's going to have that type of season, and having St. Brown and Laporta in that offense, along with Montgomery and Gibbs, is just going to help him, I feel. So, I definitely think that Jameson Williams is going to have a good year, and I definitely would consider him for a flex every week based on who I had on my team.
Yeah, and I'm just hoping that him and Goff get on like a really good page together this year. Because I just need to see something from it. They don't have Josh Reynolds now, so like you should be that wide receiver too. I could see Donovan Peoples-Jones possibly like chipping away at the wide receiver 3 spot, or Khalif Raymond. Both of them are pretty good receivers. I know the Browns traded Peoples-Jones over to them like midway through the year, so he didn't play like a whole lot, but Goff has spread the ball around to a few different people when it doesn't come down to St. Brown. Um, so it's a little hard for me to judge, but I don't know. I kind of think he's going to have a good year. I could see it swinging the other way, though, and he just kind of just mediocre at best, but I would hope that he has a good year this year, because technically this is more so of his, like, sophomore year, so, um, I don't know. He's just a tough one for me to judge, and I think I have him in roughly the right spot. But yeah, that's all I really got. He's just a tough one for me. Hollywood Brown, which we already kind of touched
Yeah,
on.
we talked about Brown. Listen, I think him and Xavier need to switch.
Yeah.
For sure. I think Brown definitely needs to drop down.
I think him
further.
And like Tank Dell switch maybe as well.
So I don't see Hollywood Brown, at least right now, in the top 50 until we know a little bit more about where he's going to be with his injury and stuff. It sounds to me like the injury that he did get, from everything that I read, is something that he's going to need time to heal, and it is an injury that's considered a high risk injury too. So I think they're going to take their time with him. So I just think he's going to drop down. And to me, he's a player that you could take a flyer on late in the draft if you wanted to and stick him on your IR. But I don't think he's going to start. I think he's going to start the season, possibly on PUB.
But yeah, we touched on him quite a bit there, so we'll kind of just skim by him there. Yeah, I'd probably switch him with probably like Tank Dell or Jerry Jeudy, and have him like in the same boat as Rice right there. Jacoby Myers.
Yeah, Jacoby Myers to me is another guy that I can see potentially jumping into the top 40. I think I might have him ranked a little bit low myself. Man, he looked really good against the Vikings yesterday in the preseason game. Last year he had over 800 yards on 71 receptions. He was targeted over 100 times. He had 8 touchdowns. I definitely think that I probably ranked him too low. I think I should have had him up higher. I definitely think that Jacoby Myers is always in the discussion for a flex option for sure. Potentially a wide receiver too, depending on how he starts off. I know a lot of people are going to lean towards, Devontae, but he still had 800 yards and 71 receptions. Even with Devontae, there, and 8 touchdowns. So,
and 2 quarterbacks.
Yeah, so I think that Jacoby Myers is another one of those players that's arrows up, and he's going to continue to climb in the rankings, and And I definitely think that he definitely needs to be drafted and definitely is a
He
flex.
could put up numbers like Jalen Waddle for all we know this year. Like he's
Right.
a nice compliment to Devontae Adams.
Yeah.
I don't really have much more to say. You kind of touched on that. I do agree. I probably should have him a little higher as well, but we can reevaluate that before the season. JSN.
Yeah. So Jackson Smith Njaba, I think that's how you say it. JSN. Last year, in his rookie year, he had 63 receptions, over 600 yards, 4 touchdowns. I think he's only going to build on that. I definitely do. I think him and Metcalf, along with Lockett there, I mean, Lockett's getting up there in age and stuff, but I think that they have a really good wide receiver core there. I like him. I think that he's going to build off of last year. I definitely think his numbers are going to be even bigger this year. I think Lockett's numbers are actually going to go down, and I think JSN's numbers are actually going to go up. I definitely think that he has the potential to have anywhere from 7 to 10 touchdowns as well. I just think that him and Metcalf are a great combination. I think whether it's Geno Smith or Sam Howell, either one of those guys are going to get them the ball and stuff. So I definitely think JSN, I had him at 38. I think he's going to definitely break the top 40 this year. I feel, I know some other people might not think that he's going to break the top 40 in the receivers. I disagree with that. I think he's going to have a better year than people think because he's definitely a talented wide receiver and still young. So I'm looking for him to definitely be a flex option for sure. Definitely drafted, definitely could be popped in as a flex option based on who you have on your bench, on your team. Depending on how he starts off, could be a borderline, wide receiver too. I'm not sure he's quite there yet for fantasy. I think this is the make or break year that's going to determine that, and stuff. But I definitely think he's a guy you should have on your radar.
Definitely someone I could see plugging in at a flex. I'd have to see a few games first before I would plug him in at a flex, but definitely someone you should draft if he was on the board.
And listen, when we're talking about flex, we're kind of going off of what we play. We do one QB, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, 1 tight end, and a flex, right? So I know that there's some leagues that they do 1 QB, 2 running backs, three wide receivers, and a flex instead of a tight end. So depending on what you do, he's definitely in that conversation for, if you do that, he's definitely wide receiver 3 flex.
Portland Sutton.
Yeah, I like Cortland Sutton. I think he's out of all the receivers in Denver, he's been the guy, with the exception of 1 year, because this will be his 7th year. He's been the guy that's been on the field the most. I mean, last year he played 16 games. The year before, 15. Played a full season in 2021. He was out for, he only played 1 game in 2020 after an injury. But before that, he played 16 and 16. So I think that this guy's going to stay healthy. I think that the year that he was out was kind of a fluky kind of a deal and stuff with his injury. He's definitely their wide receiver 1. I view Sutton as a potential, wide receiver 2 flex guy, depending on who you have on your team. You know, I think it all depends on how the quarterback position shakes out. After yesterday, I kind of get a sense that Bo Nix is going to be their starting quarterback. You know, I think we just have to wait and see. He had a tremendous game yesterday. I think Sean Payton's really high on Bo Nix. It would not surprise me that Sean Payton goes with Bo Nix this year. We'll just have to wait and see. But out of all the receivers on Denver, I think Sutton's they got Troy Franklin, who's a rookie. This is Mims's second year. Uh, Tim Patrick was hurt last year. He did an ACL. So Sutton is the guy that's definitely locked in at number one for them. And they got to throw somebody. So
Well, and he's a big body too. Like he's got a lot of upside with touchdown value. I mean, look at it last year, 10 touchdowns.
yeah, he had 10 touchdowns.
He's a big frame.
Definitely. I definitely, like I said, I definitely consider him a wide receiver too. I would feel comfortable with him as a wide receiver too. Just because I definitely think that he's the best receiver out of all the receivers on Denver's team.
Yeah, and he's easily the best. I think behind him personally would be Josh Reynolds, but um, time will tell. I think from a touchdown perspective, we'll probably see another 7 or 8 touchdowns from him this year. I could actually see him having over 1,000 yards receiving this year, and probably like another 15 receptions that he had last year. So probably around like that 75 range of receptions. I could see him breaking top 30, but I think right now sitting at that 40 spot's a pretty comfortable spot.
I agree.
For me, it'd probably be more of a flex option. I don't know if I'd put him in a wide receiver too, maybe a low end receiver too, but back to our Green Bay debate, we kind of touched on Watson quite a bit.
Yeah, you know what? I like Christian Watson. I think the guy has got a tremendous amount of talent. I think that he just needs to stay on the field. I mean, 2022 he missed 3 games. He had 611 yards and 7 touchdowns. Last year he only played in 9 games, 422 yards on 28 receptions and 5 touchdowns. He's a big receiver. He's definitely a red zone target. He just needs to stay on the field. Yeah. Personally, after looking at everything, I think there might be a couple guys I'd put above him. Given the fact that I think that they could be above him. The reason I put him where I did is because I think he's definitely got a more solid QB situation in Green Bay than some of these other guys have. So to me, as much as it hurts to say and talk about a Packer, that's why I put him there. He definitely has potential to break the top 40. I had him at 37, but it all depends on if he's on the field. He certainly needs to be on your bench, and to draft. If he stays healthy and he's out there, I mean, he's definitely got to be a flex option depending on your choices, because he is a red zone guy, and
he's a big frame.
If he stays out there for a full season, the guy could have 10 touchdowns or more.
Another big frame, 6'4", just like Cortland Sutton. So big bodies are always nice to have in that red zone because you can get the ball to places where defenders can't get to it. So like, if Watson's healthy,
he's proven that he's great in the red zone.
Well, too. Yeah, even in his 9 games he played, he had 5 touchdowns. You're talking like basically every other game he had a touchdown, and that he probably would have been at 10 touchdowns if he was healthy all year last year.
Yeah,
and the year before. So I think with us having him here at the 39 spot, it's pretty good. I think we both kind of expect him to miss a game or two this year, just because of his injury history. But even in that time, I could still see him.
He said he's got it figured out, so we'll just have to wait and see.
Well, didn't he go down like the other day in practice at one point? But
yeah, it was nothing big.
Christian Kirk.
Yeah, personally, I think I got Kirk too high. I don't think he's going to be in the top 40. I think Brian Thomas is definitely going to take away from him. I think Evan Ingram is going to take away from him. They brought in Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis has the potential has potential for sure. I'm not a huge Kirk fan. I definitely think I have him ranked too high after looking at this. I think, maybe top 50, between 45 and 50. I think that might be a stretch. He did have the 1 year in Jacksonville where he had 8 touchdowns back in 2022, but that was before they brought in Ridley, right? Yep. And then I don't even know if they had Ingram back in 2022. I think Ingram was just there last year.
Oh, he was there.
Okay, so he was there. So at any rate, I just but I think Brian Thomas is another one of these rookie wide receivers that is only going to get better throughout the season. He's going to take away from Kirk. So I'm not too high on Kirk this year. I need to see more from him. I don't really necessarily view Kirk as a number one receiver. That is just me. I don't view him as a number one receiver. I think Kirk is, I just don't view him as a number one receiver. So
I mean, me personally, I think he's right where he should be. Obviously, 38, 38. But um, I think in his time in Jacksonville, he's had a pretty solid connection with Trevor Lawrence. I think that will continue. I see him around, another 8, 9, 1,000 yards, somewhere in that range. And I see him with 5 or 6 touchdowns. Maybe 7. I don't know. It kind of depends, but
yeah, and I should say he did miss 5 games last year. He was only out there for 12 games,
yeah,
so that impacted his production.
yeah,
But with that being said, in his 6 years playing, he's only had 2 seasons that he's played a
yeah.
full season.
So he does need to be fully healthy, but I could see him being a top 40 guy. I could see him, pushing 35 range. Like you said, though, Brian Thomas will take away reps. Gabe Davis will as well. I wouldn't put him anywhere near his top 15 finish he had with Trevor Lawrence's first year in Jacksonville, but I could totally see him being in this top 40 range. I think right at 38 is probably a pretty good spot.
I will say this: out of the years that Trevor's been there, this is probably his best receiving. Well, one of his best receiving crews. Um, you know, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think last year's was pretty good. It just
Yeah.
he didn't capitalize on what he had.
Time will tell.
Jordan Addison. This is where I think we could probably have Jacoby Myers, probably at like 38 right next to Robin or Addison here.
Listen, I think Jordan Addison has a great amount of potential. He jumped in there last year for the Vikings. He had 70 receptions for over 900 yards. He had 10 touchdowns. He's definitely their wide receiver too. With that being said, Jordan Addison is in the doghouse, people. Let me just say that. He is not, he's had off the field issues, which the Vikings are not happy with. He's got receivers that are nipping at the tail, at his coattails right now. Jalen Naylor being one of them. Anybody that watched the game yesterday, Naylor was out there. I mean, Naylor looked really good. Tristan Jackson looked really good. Addison played yesterday with the number ones. He was the number one receiver because they obviously didn't play Jefferson. Addison had 1 reception. Okay, it's preseason. I get it. Here's my concern with Addison. Addison, yes, he had a great year last year. I think he's got a lot of talent. I really do. I just wonder how he's gonna do. When he's great as a complement to Jefferson, but is he going to be able to get that separation on double teams if he's double teamed? How is he? Is he going to be able to maintain that? Is he going to be able to stay, out of trouble off the field? The Vikings have already said 1 more strike and you're out. I think that if he stays healthy, which we can say, which he did last year, he definitely is going to be the Vikings wide receiver too.
Oh yeah,
I definitely see that. Could he have the same year? Time will tell. Last year he had Kirk Cousins thrown to him. That's why he was targeted over 100 times. This year it's hard to say. He's got Darnell. We got McCarthy. We don't know which one of them is going to be the starting quarterback. I think that's going to have a lot to say with, with how Addison does. Me personally, I think McCarthy starts, Addison could probably have a better season. If Darnell ends up starting right off the gate, I think initially, I think Addison isn't gonna. He's gonna have a slow start. Personally, that's just my opinion. I do think that he has breakaway speed. He does have potential to get 10 touchdowns. I think it just all depends on who the quarterback is. I think we got him where he should be. Looking at this, I definitely think he could be a top 40. Um, and if anybody from the Vikings organization is watching, hey, please, hey, call San Francisco. Maybe an Ayuk for Addison trade. Just saying.
Yeah, this he could definitely be a receiver on the trade block here, especially with how unhappy everyone is with his off-field issues. But I agree with you. I think we have him right where he should be. I mean, for me personally, I had him at 39. I think he might even be a little lower because I don't think his touchdown production is going to be there. And truthfully, I think he's not going to have 70 receptions this year. I think he'd be lucky to hit 60. I think the quarterback situation is just a little tough going into the year, and I could totally even see these wide receiver threes or four with Naylor and Jackson, even Sherfield, maybe chip away a little bit at his production. I think the main guy on this offense is still going to be the man himself in Jefferson.
I consider Addison a flex option because you got to give him at least a flex option because last year he did have 10 touchdowns. Yeah. So any given game he could score a touchdown. And a few of those games were
2 touchdown games.
So I think he's definitely a flex. Until we see the quarterback situation shake out, I don't think there's any discussion with him being any higher than that until we see how that shakes out.
Yeah. Chris Godwin.
I know a lot of people are high on Godwin. Last year he did have over 1,000 yards, 83 receptions. It was his first healthy season.
2018.
Yeah, I mean, so if he stays healthy, I definitely think he has an opportunity to break the top 30. I know, most people have him, around that top 30 range. I ranked him around 39, and I know Wiggs had him a little bit higher. I think we got him in a good spot. I think he is a wide receiver too. I definitely think that he's definitely a wide receiver too. The only thing I don't like about Godwin is over the last several years he just hasn't had the TD production. The last time he scored over 5 touchdowns was back in 2020. 2021 he had 5. The last 2 years he's only had 2 and 3 touchdowns. In PPR you want those guys touchdowns route. Now he makes up for it with targets because last year he got targeted 130 times, 142 in 2022, 128 in 2021. He would have been over 100 targets in 2020 if he was out on the field the whole season. He had over 120 when he was only playing 14 games back in 2019. So I definitely think Godwin is a wide receiver too, given your situation and stuff like that. And if he stays out on the field like he did last year, I definitely could see him over 1,000 yards again for sure. I think they got Baker Mayfield, who showed last year he's got a connection with both Godwin and Evans. Like I said, the only thing that shies me away from him a little bit is his TD production, but he makes up for it in the amount of receptions and targets that he gets. So I think he definitely has potential to be in the top 30, but I think we got him in a good spot.
I think even top 20 potential if he gets the touchdown production. Because you look at his stats, he's, for the most part, even when fighting injuries, right around that 1,000-yard mark every year. And having that many targets, literally, like, if he just catches a few more of those, like, that's another point. So, if he gets targeted just as much as he has been the last few years and stays on the field, I mean, even in his years where he's hurt, he's getting targeted 130 times, which is nuts.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think I probably rated him just a little bit too low. He definitely, to me, is above Addison.
Yeah.
I think at the time I was thinking Addison, with the touchdown production, but, I can see that I may have ranked him a little bit too low. So I definitely think his arrow is going up.
Yeah, and like I said, I could definitely see him being top 20 if he gets the touchdown production behind it. I think Mike Evans does a great job at getting him open, so I think that's why we see so many targets behind him. Does Mike Evans get the same amount of targets? Oh, damn. Oh my
136.
God.
Mike Evans, yeah, and Mike Evans gets all the red zone stuff.
Yeah, so
I mean, Mike Evans had 13 touchdowns last
yeah,
year. So.
I could definitely see Godwin being a top 20 guy. I definitely would draft him. I could 100% agree with the wide receiver too. If you had the depth on your team, like if he's your third receiver you draft,
Then you put him in
yeah,
a flex.
yeah, there's your flex right there. Like definitely wide receiver two potential. I think he's the first one on this list. I'd clearly say wide receiver two in my eyes, personally at least. We got Reed.
Yay, another Packer receiver. I love so much to talk about the Packers. You know what? Reed played 16 games last year. He had 64 receptions for almost 800 yards. It was like 93.
Yep.
8 touchdowns. Again, he's in this loaded offense. It's hard to argue that the Packers to me might have the best overall wide receiver room for sure. So I definitely think that, and he might have sat out the last game because they made the playoffs last year. You know, I'm not sure, but, or did he miss one game? He missed one game. Yeah. So, but I definitely, I like Jaden Reed. I definitely think, he's, out of all the receivers on the Packers, to me, he probably is the one.
I think he's the most talented.
Well, I think he's probably the one that is the closest to being a wide receiver too.
Oh, that's fair.
Just because I think that he's only gonna go up. This guy's got a tremendous amount of talent. I definitely think that he could break the top 30. But I think the reason why he ended up where he did right now is they just spread the ball around so much. So, but he could break off for 10 or 12 touchdowns, and that could put him into the top 30 for sure. So I think he's definitely got an arrow going up. As much as I hate to say it and trying to be objective here, even though he's a Packer, I do like the Packer wide receiving core for fantasy.
Yeah, for me, it's I don't know if I could put any Packer right now at my wide receiver too, just with the uncertainties of who's the guy in that offense. I think of the three Packers we have on the board, I think they're all flex options. You can even make an argument for Wicks possibly too. It's just hard to judge because Love gets the ball to all of his receivers, and at any given moment, any one of these guys could pop off. For me, I think it's safer to play them as a flex, just because you never know what you're going to get from them.
I think it all depends on who you have on your team too. So.
Well, that as well. Zay Flowers.
Well, Zay Flowers is definitely the best receiver on the Ravens team, for sure. I definitely think we have him right where he should be. With Mark Andrews coming back this year, it's always hard to judge, where Lamar is going to, throw his targets. Although Zay did get targeted over 100 times last year, had 77 receptions for 858 yards and 5 touchdowns. I think he could be right around that again. I think Mark Andrews being back is only going to help Zay Flowers in the long run because they're gonna have to account for Andrews over the middle. I know Rashad Bateman's had a really good training camp from what I've heard, and he's looked strong this year. If Bateman's out there, I think that's going to also open it up for Flowers. I like this guy. I think he's got a tremendous amount of talent, and I think he's only going to go up. I definitely think he is right on the brink of the top 30. Could break the top 30 for sure. Given the fact that he's got that breakaway speed and the amount of targets and stuff like that. I think he's borderline low end RB2 / flex option, depending on your situation on your team. But he's definitely going to be in your starting lineup for sure, unless you got an unbelievable team or other players above him, because he just has the potential every single game to break off for a touchdown.
I think that's enough said. I don't got much to add on there. Lad McConkey.
Yeah, so Lad's another one of these rookies. Again, this is a really a strong rookie class. I think that he's definitely him and Josh Palmer are going to be the guys. I think on the receiving side of the end, but I definitely think McConkey's going to probably end up, even as the year goes on, he's going to be the guy. That's just my opinion. I think that the Chargers really like this guy. I think Herbert's going to like him as well. So I think that he has the potential to definitely break the top 30. He's right there. Um, you know, very low end wide receiver 2, but I would probably say more so a flex to start off the season with the potential of moving up to wide receiver 2 once we see exactly what Harbaugh and his offense are going to do. But I'm high on this guy. I think he's another one of these rookie receivers that he might start off a little bit slow. That's why you might want to look at him as a flex. But I definitely think that having Herbert as his quarterback is only a plus. So I think that that's going to make him even stronger. I really think that he's going to have one of the better rookie years.
And I think he could be a borderline wide receiver too once like the mid-season to the later half of the year
Absolutely.
hits around. And he's 6 foot, so not the tallest, but I think he'll still probably be that red zone guy there for the team because Josh Palmer's not tall either. Maybe Brendan Rice a little bit. I think I was gonna say 6'4" there, but he's 6'3", and then you also have DJ Chark, who could probably be a red zone threat there. But I definitely think he'll get the bulk of the load. And looking at Herbert's history, like, yeah, they're not going to throw the ball as much, but once he finds his receiver, he finds his flipping receivers. Like, just look at Keenan Allen over the years. Even Mike Williams, when he was healthy, he will find his receivers the ball. Malik Neighbors.
Yeah, you know what? You could make an argument that Neighbors is actually the best receiver in this rookie class. There's some people that actually said that had him ranked higher than Harrison. I think the Giants snabbing him was really smart. I know that if you watched the draft, you could, and when you first got there, he wasn't very excited about it. But this guy is a tremendous talent. I definitely think he's going to be in the top 30 for sure. I think he's going to have a big year. I really do. You know, even with Danny Dimes throwing to him, they're going to pump the ball his way. And I think it's going to be hard. I think he's going to open it up for Wendell Robinson and Slayton as well. But I do think that Neighbors has the potential this year to actually be the top rookie receiver. I can see him having a better year over Harrison. The only thing that Harrison's got going for him is I give Murray a little bit of an advantage over Daniel Jones from a quarterback perspective, but I definitely think Neighbors is going to have a good year. He did get a little tweaked in practice today, but they said it wasn't anything serious. It was a minor ankle injury, a minor sprain. Nothing big though. So I don't think I think he'll be fine. So I'm not worried about it. He's definitely for me. You got to draft him, and he's definitely a flex for sure. But given the fact that he's one of the highest rated rookies this year, you can make an argument that you should stick him in there as your RB2.
Wide receiver 2.
Yep. Or wide receiver 2. Sorry.
No, yeah, I agree with you. And like we talked about earlier, they're going to be throwing the ball a lot this year. I don't think their running game's going to be good at all, and they're going to be playing from behind. Their schedule is a really tough schedule. Like with the exception of Minnesota right away, with our defense being terrible, but you have Washington as a divisional match, and then Cleveland, Dallas. Yeah, like you don't have an easy schedule at all. There's a lot of good defenses in this mix, so
I will say this: the first game against Minnesota, Minnesota's cornerbacks are a mess right now.
our
I,
neighbors.
I it wouldn't surprise me if he has a breakout game against Minnesota, especially being at home. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But yeah, I'm high on him.
The
So
only thing I will say though, if this meeting with Stephon Gilmore goes good with the Vikings, it might not be as great as we all think, because that will give Gilmore enough time to catch up, and he'll probably be locking up on neighbors.
yeah, we'll see.
Amari Cooper.
Yeah, so I think we got Cooper right where he needs to be. Uh, I think the reason, I had him ranked just a little bit higher than Wiggs, but I can see where Wiggs had him at 31. I think he's right on the cusp of he's definitely, right on the cusp of the top 30 with the potential to make the top 20. I think it really all depends on, what's Deshaun Watson going to look like this year. Last year, Cooper had 72 receptions for 1,209, was it 90 yards or 50 yards?
1250, yeah.
And then he had 5 touchdowns. I could see him potentially repeating that. The reason I ranked him a little bit lower is that I really want to see a little bit more consistency out of Watson. Watson wasn't very consistent last year. So, if Watson comes out and has a consistent year and gets back to his old form, I definitely could see Cooper potentially breaking the top 20 for sure. I view Cooper as a solid wide receiver too, for sure. Uh, um, you know, I don't know that I would push him any higher than that right now until we see where he ends up. But I definitely would consider him a solid wide receiver too, right in the middle of the pack.
Yeah, and it just kind of really depends on how Watson plays. Looking at the numbers from last year, the two games that stick out to me the most are the two with Flacco before he was out the last 2 games of the year, where he put up like 400 yards in the span of 2 games, just because Flacco threw him the ball or threw the ball his way 15 times. He caught it 11 times for 265 in one of the games, and then he was over 100 in the other. You look at the rest of the year with Watson, he only had 3 games. Maybe you can round up the 98 to 4 there, where he had 100 yards in a game.
Yeah,
And a
yeah,
lot of his touchdown production game with Flacco. So at the end of the day, I really think it comes down to how Deshaun Watson utilizes Cooper. Um, he's a frustrating one. He kind of reminds me of Tyler Lockett, where you kind of have to rely on him getting a touchdown. And I know I've had Cooper in a lot of my fantasy leagues over the year, and him and Lockett are the two most annoying guys on my team to ever start, because when you start them, they don't always get the touchdown or get the yards or receptions. But then when you bench them, then they pop off, and it's just kind of one of those annoying players to have on the team sometimes. At least for me personally. But he's got a lot of upside. Like, yeah, he's 30, but he's shown each and every year that he's targeted 130 times, 120 plus, and he doesn't miss a whole lot of games. It's just here and there, like 1 or 2 games.
right.
He
Yep.
hasn't had any serious injury where it's kept him out for more than 3. Not even. I think it's just more than 2.
Yeah. So, well, anyways, that wraps up our wide receiver rankings 31 through 60. Again, like I've mentioned before, we really appreciate everybody that's subscribed. Check out our page at Fantasy Fools PPR on YouTube. We're also out on Snapchat, X, Instagram,
TikTok.
TikTok. I was trying to think of the other one. I had a brain fart there. So check us out on all those channels. Like, subscribe, follow. We appreciate all you guys out there. Hopefully you find this beneficial. Again, like I said, we just wanted to you know give a different perspective than other people. So we hope you find this beneficial and it helps you We are gonna, we are working on some other different content that we're gonna start doubling up here hopefully soon, with some other things. As people are getting into their drafts now, because we know it's draft time coming up here really quick. So you'll start to see some more live streams and more videos being dropped. So keep your eyes open, and we appreciate it. Wiggs, you want to add anything?
Nope. We're good to sign on.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.